Now, if you're anything like me, you spend an extraordinary amount of time on your smartphone. So the question is why? Why do we spend so much time on our smartphones, and how do these little devices dictate so much of what we do each day? What is it about these social media apps that keeps us coming back to them again and again and again, day after day after day? Well, I think that a good place to look for answers here would be the science of habits. And of course, when it comes to the science of habits, there is no one in the world better to speak to than Professor Wendy Wood. Hi, Wendy. For those in my audience who still don't know who you are, can you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Wendy Wood, and I am a professor at the University of Southern California. And you and I have worked together on a number of projects, and so I'm delighted to be here today to talk with you, Peter.
Thank you. So the reason I wanted to talk to Professor Wood in this video is because she recently published this amazing paper with one of her PhD students, Ian Anderson, called The Electronic Herd. And in this amazing research that they did together, they look into the psychology behind social media habits that so many of us have. Now, as with any habit breakdown, I think that the first thing to look at is always, why is that behavior rewarding in the first place? So I asked Professor Wood, what is it about social media apps that makes it so enjoyable for us to use, and why are so many people drawn to it?
Well, it's a great way to connect with other people and actually get direct feedback from them. So when you're talking to people, they smile at you and they might laugh and they might reinforce the things you're saying. But online, you get likes, you get followers, it's public. People can see that you have this social network that you're forming of people who like what you say and respect you. So it's very reinforcing. It builds on us as a social species in making connections and making them very publicly. And that's part of why those rewards are so powerful, is that they're public. People can see them. Other people can see them easily.
So now we understand how social media is rewarding. The next thing to figure out are what are the cues in our environment that are automatically triggering this social media use habit. Now, of course, when it comes to using social media apps, your smartphone or your mobile device is always going to be part of the environment that triggers this social media habit. But in addition to your smartphone, there are probably other things in your environment too. Like, for example,
it could be a location. You see a lot of people access social media when they're on a bus or when they're waiting for something. So those could be contexts as well that get linked with accessing social media. So the next time you're bored or the next time you're in that location, then you automatically just pick up your phone or start scrolling through your laptop and you sign on to social media. So that's that context driving behavior that's separate from our motivation. Rewards become less important and the behavior becomes driven by context as it becomes more habitual.
Did you hear that? Rewards from social media become less important as the behavior gets more habitual. What that means is that for many of us, we're scrolling through Instagram or scrolling through Twitter, and we keep on doing it even though no one has actually posted anything that interesting and worth our attention. We just do it because that's what we're used to doing, and because we've repeated this behavior so many times and it's so ingrained in our brains that this is what we do, we continue to do it regardless of whether there's anything interesting to look at. Let's talk about cues. So firstly, notifications. Why are notifications important for triggering our habits?
Well, you can turn them off. And I actually recommend that people do that because notifications become, as you say, cues that then remind us that we have friends on social media, that social media is something that we can use right now. And it triggers us picking it up, even in places where we might not really want to do that, right? We're out to dinner with friends, assuming we'll get to do that again at some point soon. We're out to dinner with friends and then we get these notifications and then we start looking at our phone. And if you ask people, they would probably say, no, I'd rather actually talk to my friend here. But that automatic behavior is being cued by the notifications. So that's something that social media uses to keep us engaged. It becomes the trigger to us using it.
The next part of the paper I question Wendy about is when they talk about the endless scroll, which is a common feature you see in a lot of social media apps. You'll have a feed like this and you can just keep going and going and going and going, and it just never ends. So I had to ask Professor Wood, why is this important in terms of habits?
Well, that's something that we discovered in doing research for the article you mentioned. Ian is very interested in social media, and he did a great deal of background work to figure out what is it that makes media use so very compelling. And one of the things they figured out to do is, as you say, this scroll. So there's no endpoints. It's not like at some point it stops, and that's a cue to you to stop. So it just continues forever, and you can just keep scrolling for hours. And then the scroll presents each piece of information by itself. So you see a bunch of really stupid things that you're not interested in. And then every once in a while, something emerges that's really interesting. And that's very important in building habits. We call that intermittent rewards.
Ding ding ding, they're back again. Intermittent rewards or variable rewards. We talk about these all the time on the channel. We talked about it in the Clubhouse video, we talked about it in the TikTok video, we talked about it in the Tinder video, and here you have Professor Wendy Wood herself telling you the same thing as me, that these intermittent variable rewards are so powerful when it comes to habit formation.
So when you're building a habit, rewards are important, and having them appear intermittently like that, it's like a slot machine, right? It's like gambling. It is a surprise, it's really rewarding, and it keeps you scrolling when you first start and builds those habit connections in your mind.
Now I'm going to leave this next section pretty much completely unedited because it's just such fantastic wisdom coming from Professor Wood. We're talking about quitting social media, so just pay attention, listen, try and internalize the message because it can really do you a lot of good. Many of us today are addicted to our phones and spend far too much time on them. So if we want to quit, we should just try really hard, right?
It'd be great if we could control our habits that way by just trying hard, exerting enough willpower. But it doesn't really work that way, as you and I have talked before. I think that a lot of people feel they're addicted to their cell phones and to social media because it keeps us going back. Even as you and I were saying, in contexts where it might not really be in our best interest, we're still going back to using it. So it feels like it's a little bit out of control, but I don't think, and Ian doesn't think, it's an addiction. In the same way that drug use can become an addiction, smoking can become an addiction, there's not an addictive substance, and there's not an altered mental state or altered physiological state in any way that's associated with using social media. And I think the label addiction makes it seem like social media is really bad for us, whereas in actual fact, sometimes it's good for us, sometimes it's bad for us. It depends on how we're using it. And people report feeling more socially connected if they use social media in certain ways. So it can be beneficial. It's not like an addictive substance. And the other thing about that label is it's pejorative. It blames you, right? So you're somebody who has an addiction. So you have to deal with the implications of that instead of thinking, okay, social media has been set up to keep me using it. And it's done it in these ways so that if I'm a frequent user, it triggers my habits. And what we all need to do is we all need to sort of reverse engineer all of the tricks that social media uses to keep us engaged. So as I said, I turn off notifications on all of my social media. I don't want social media to decide when I'm going to use it. I also don't take my cell phone with me unless I'm sure that I'm actually going to need it. And in that way, it sort of separates me from the impulse or the cues to use social media, and it helps to control it. And if I do take my phone with me, I put it face down on the table, so I'm not as likely, I'm not cued to pick it up and use it. So there are things you can do to reduce its impact, its control over your life, and put you more in control of social media use.
Yeah, putting the phone face down, it reminds me a lot of that condition in the marshmallow experiment that we were talking about this week. Do you want to talk about that condition and how that relates to the cues?
Yeah, so one of the classic experiments in psychology that most of your audience will be familiar with is Michelle's Marshmallow study of self-control. And what Michelle was interested in is how these kids, they were only 4 years old, how these kids actually were able to control their behavior themselves by imagining other things, using distracting strategies. But there's one condition in that study that almost nobody talks about, but I think is the most interesting. And that is in one, for some of the participants, they got the marshmallow. These are little 4-year-olds. They got the marshmallow. They're told to sit there for 15 minutes. If they don't eat it, they get 2 marshmallows. So all of them are motivated, but typically they can't do it. I mean, most struggle. But what the researchers did in this one condition is they put a pie plate over the marshmallow, and then they put it under the table, so kids couldn't see it as easily. They told the kids, you can take the tin off anytime you want to, and you can eat the marshmallow. That's up to you. But I'm just going to cover it for now. And almost all of the kids were able to wait 15 minutes in that condition, over 90%. That's amazing, because these are little 4-year-olds who are able to control this response to a temptation. And what that indicates, I think, is that very often self-control is something in our environment that we can create ourselves. It's not always something inside us. We can rely on the environment to help us meet our goals and exert self-control. And so that's what, in a way, these kids were doing. And it was really successful. And yes, putting your phone face down is just the same thing. It's reducing those cues and making it more likely that you're going to be able to follow your own goals, not the social media site's goals for you.
That's really wonderful. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks for that explanation. Hey guys, so if you made it to the end of this video, could you please let the YouTube algorithm know by giving it a thumbs up? It really helps me out. Also, huge thank you to Professor Wood for lending me her time to help me make this video. It's very, very generous of her to do so. I'll leave a link to Professor Wood and Ian Anderson's paper that we talked about in this video, top link in the description. I'll also leave a link to Professor Wood's book, Good Habits, Bad Habits, which is an excellent book on how to build habits using science. Before I sign off, guys, as well, I just want to say a huge thank you to you. The support on the channel recently has just been phenomenal, and not just in terms of views and subscribers, but you guys also leave just so many kind comments and messages on all my social media and obviously below the videos, and I can't tell you how encouraging it is and just how nice it is to hear that so many people are enjoying my videos. So thank you so much, I really, really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye. Yeah, I noticed that as well. So I'll just be scrolling and then I don't feel any kind of reward at all, but I'm still doing it. Yeah. Can you talk about the example of when Instagram introduced stories like Snapchat, and how that kind of relates to cues. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Oh,
Okay, never mind.
you know this article better than I do.
I've read it so many times now.